At 11:45 on the 5th of November 1831, the bell rang at the dissecting room door of King's College in London. The porter, a man named William Hill, opened it. Outside stood two men he knew well. They had sold bodies to the school before. They told him they had a male subject, a boy about 14 years old. They wanted 12 guineas for him. Hill said the price was too high and that the college was not particularly in need. But he went to fetch the demonstrator of anatomy, a young man named Richard Partridge, who had held the post for only a matter of weeks. That afternoon, the men came back with a hamper. They tipped the body out onto the floor, and within a few minutes, everyone in that room understood that they were looking at something other than a stolen corpse, not because of what had been done to the boy, because of what had not. Understanding what gave them away means understanding a trade that London had quietly tolerated for the better part of a century. The men at the door were resurrectionists, body snatchers. They dug up the freshly buried and sold them to anatomy schools, and they had done it for years without any serious risk of the gallows, because in English law, a corpse was not property. Stealing one was not, strictly speaking, theft. Take the shroud with it and you could be transported. Take only the body, and the courts struggled to say what crime had occurred. So the graveyards of London were guarded. Families paid for iron cages over new plots, for watchmen, for heavy stone slabs. Undertakers sold coffins advertised as secure. In the poorer parishes, where nobody could pay for any of that, the ground was simply dug up again within days. And the anatomists paid without asking questions. They needed the bodies. Their students needed them more. The reason lay in a law passed almost 80 years earlier. Under the Murder Act of 1752, there was exactly one legal source of bodies for dissection in England: the corpses of executed murderers. Dissection was written into the sentence deliberately as an additional punishment, a fate worse than hanging in the popular imagination, because it denied a person a whole body for burial. In an average year, that produced somewhere in the region of a dozen bodies for the entire country. Meanwhile, the London medical schools were teaching hundreds of students, each of whom was expected to dissect. The gap between what the law supplied and what the profession required was enormous, and it was filled in the only way such gaps ever are: by men with shovels working at night, paid in cash, by respectable institutions that preferred not to inquire too closely. The trade had a logic, and that logic had a limit. The fresher the body, the higher the price. And there is a point at which a man doing that arithmetic stops seeing a shortcut and starts seeing a business model. Which brings us back to the floor of the dissecting room at King's College. Partridge examined the boy. The body was too fresh. There was no soil on it, no sign of a shroud, nothing to suggest it had ever been in the ground at all. There was a cut on the forehead and the eyes were bloodshot. The teeth had been pulled out. That last detail was not a mystery to anyone present. Teeth sold separately to dentists for good money. Partridge did not raise the alarm in front of them. He told the men he could not pay immediately because he had no change for a 50-pound note and asked them to wait. Then he sent word to his superior, and word went to the police. All 4 members of the gang were arrested while they were still standing there waiting to be paid. Their names were John Bishop, Thomas Williams, James May, and Michael Shields. The police went to Bishop's home at Nova Scotia Gardens in Bethnal Green. It was a row of poor cottages backing onto waste ground. In the garden was a well. In and around it they found clothing. A boy's clothing, hidden where it would not be seen. The obvious question, then and now, is who he was. The police believed he was an Italian street boy named Carlo Ferrari, one of thousands of children living hand-to-mouth on London's streets. Witnesses recalled a boy who begged around Covent Garden, showing white mice in a cage for coins. That was the name reported in the press, the name on the trial pamphlets, and the name history has largely kept. But after they were convicted, Bishop and Williams said it was wrong. They claimed the boy was not Italian at all, but a drover's lad from Lincolnshire, brought to London with cattle for Smithfield Market. Neither claim was ever proved. Nobody came forward for him. No family, no employer, no friend. He is one of the most consequential murder victims in British legal history, and we do not know his name. What we do know is what was done to him. Bishop and Williams confessed. They gave the boy a drink laced with laudanum until he lost consciousness, then lowered him into the well in the garden and left him there to drown. It was quiet. It left almost no marks, and it produced exactly what the market wanted: a body that had never been buried. The following morning, they carried him across London in a hamper and spent the day trying to find a buyer, going from one hospital to another until King's College finally looked closely. And in his confession, Bishop said something that ought to have been the real story. He said he had been lifting bodies since around 1818, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 of them, over more than a decade, sold to institutions including St. Bartholomew's, Guy's, and King's College. He also admitted that the boy was not the first person he had killed. He named a woman called Frances Pigburn and a boy he knew only as Cunningham. 3 victims, then, that we can point to. 2 of them named only in the confession of the man who killed them. The trial opened at the Old Bailey on Friday, the 2nd of December, 1831, before the Lord Chief Justice. The public benches were crowded with the nobility, including a royal duke, treating it as an event. Bishop, Williams, and May were all found guilty of murder. May was afterwards respited. The evidence indicated he had known nothing of the killing itself and had joined only for the sale. His sentence was commuted to transportation, and he did not live long afterwards. Shields, who had carried the hamper, was cleared. On the 5th of December, Bishop and Williams were hanged outside Newgate. The crowd was reported at 30,000. And then the state did something with a symmetry so exact, it barely reads as real. Their bodies were taken down that same night and sent to the anatomists. Bishop went to King's College, the school that had turned him in. Williams went to the Anatomy Theatre in Windmill Street. Both men were dissected, and their remains were put on public display, and large crowds came to look. They were killed under the old law, and their corpses became precisely what they had spent 13 years supplying. The spectacle did not stop there. The police opened up the cottages at Nova Scotia Gardens to the public and charged 5 shillings to walk through. Visitors tasted the water from the well. People pulled the buildings apart and carried the pieces home as souvenirs, until there was effectively nothing left standing. The following year, Parliament acted. In 1832, the Anatomy Act became law, and the body snatching trade collapsed almost immediately. It is usually presented as the moment the system was fixed. It is worth being precise about what the fix actually was. The act did not create a supply of donated bodies. It ended the old rule that tied dissection to executed murderers, and it replaced that supply with a new one: the unclaimed dead of workhouses, hospitals, and poorhouses, people who died with nobody able or willing to pay for a funeral. The historian Ruth Richardson put the consequence plainly. Dissection had been a punishment for murder. After 1832, in practice, it became a punishment for poverty. The poor of London understood this immediately, which is why the dread of a pauper's funeral ran so deep for the rest of the century, and why families in genuine hardship kept up burial payments they could not afford. The trade in bodies did not end. It was nationalized, and the paperwork made it respectable. The men who dug up the dead were hanged, which was necessary and just. The market that paid them and the law that made that market inevitable were never really put on trial at all. Parliament simply found a source of bodies that would not generate complaints, because the people supplying them were in no position to complain about anything. The boy in the hamper changed British law more than most members of Parliament ever have. He has no grave anyone can visit and no name anyone can be certain of. If a system creates a demand that can only be met by crime, is the crime really the failure? Or is it just the part that is easiest to punish? Subscribe for more forgotten history and untold true crime.